Let's talk about why you need some hard assets, some wealth stored outside of the banking system, outside of your online brokerage, in your possession. Some real, physical, tangible money that you can have in your hand. Before we get started today, I want to say a big thank you to you for tuning into my YouTube channel. If you guys like this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and don't forget to click that subscribe button and the bell notification icon down below so that you can see more great videos about silver, gold, and precious metals in the future. Physical wealth outside of the banking system. Why do you need to have this stuff? Well, if you guys were watching the news yesterday, or even if you just tried to access some of your social media accounts, you might have noticed that Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp were down for an extended period of time. They actually were inaccessible for over 6 hours yesterday. It was the result of a bad update that Facebook had released, and it basically took their entire ecosystem offline for over 6 hours. And this was pretty disruptive. The share price of Facebook dropped, I think, over 6% when this news hit. Mark Zuckerberg himself lost billions of dollars yesterday. Now, this isn't a boo-hoo for billionaires video. I'm sure Zuckerberg himself will be fine, but it does go to show that these electronic systems that we've all come to rely on and use, and I think we've all kind of come to take them for granted, it reveals just how vulnerable they really are. Because if something as big as Facebook can go down for 6 hours, and this wasn't like a malicious attack or anything, this was just a mistake. They released bad software in an update, and it took down their entire ecosystem for a good chunk of the day. So you can kind of imagine how badly things could go if somebody was purposely trying to disrupt systems like this. And I know that Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp, I mean, it's not the end of the world when those things go down, although for a lot of people it might be, especially if you're kind of addicted to your social media, constant stream coming in. But just think about what could happen if that wasn't Facebook or Instagram or WhatsApp. What if it was, say, the banking system? Or what if it was your online brokerage that went down for 6 hours? What if it was longer than 6 hours? What if some of those systems that we rely on went down for an extended period of time? We're talking days or weeks. I don't think that that is outside of the realm of possibilities. You know, we've moved into this era where all of our monetary transactions are basically moving online. It's pretty rare that people pay for things with cash these days. You know, it's not unheard of, but typically people are swiping their credit cards, their debit cards, or they might even be using something like Apple Pay, paying with their cell phone. Some people are paying for stuff with cryptocurrency. So we've really moved away from physical transactions. And what would happen if just your credit card stopped working? If you went to the store, the credit card machine didn't work. What if the processing wasn't working? You know, I don't think there's too many stores, if you go in these days, that are going to be able to take out one of those ka-chunk swipe machines. And if, you know, you're a young person watching this video, you probably don't even know what I'm talking about. But those physical credit card imprint machines, how many people still know how to use those? How many stores can process a credit card payment without having internet access? I don't think it's very many, and I think that something like that could be extremely disruptive. If Facebook going down for 6 hours can lose billions of dollars in wealth for investors and for billionaires also, then just imagine what a widespread disruption to, say, our payment system or electronic banking could really do to our economy. And think about what it would do to you as an individual. Would you be able to go out and buy groceries right now if you didn't have access to your bank account or your credit cards? And that's a really important consideration, I think. And I'm not just saying that you want to have silver, although silver, I think, is probably the best way to store wealth outside of the banking system. But you might also want to have an emergency cash supply. I think that's a very good idea. Have some money on hand for cash. Be able to pay, you know, maybe a month's worth of bills with cash. And then beyond that, having some precious metals actually in your physical possession, I think, is a really, really good safeguard against the possibility of financial havoc being wreaked in our electronic banking system. You know, we're living in an era where more and more things are moving online. disruptions to those systems can have serious consequences in the physical real world. I was reading that at Facebook, employees couldn't even get into the building yesterday because they use these badges that are like Internet of Thing badges, and the whole ecosystem was down, so those weren't working, so they were locked out of their workplace. So I'm sure that was a real headache for them. And imagine being at your workplace and there's this crisis going on and you're trying to get into the office to start resolving these problems and you can't even open the door. So, moving forward, things are only going to become more wired and more interconnected as we move forward with the, Internet of Things. I really think that it's just a wise decision to keep some of your wealth in your possession. You don't want all of your assets and all of your wealth to just be ones and zeros in a computer somewhere. Just imagine, a cyber attack on our banking infrastructure. If a failed software update can take down a major platform for 6 hours, I would think that a concerted effort and a cyber attack could really wreak a lot of havoc. So not saying that's going to happen, but those are the sort of things that nobody really sees coming until they occur. It's the proverbial black swan event, so something you want to be prepared for. But all of that aside, there are some very compelling reasons to have some of this stuff stacked up and in your physical possession. Let's just say that all of our electronic banking systems and brokerage accounts and credit cards and payment systems, all of that is extremely robust and it can weather any assault on it. And I think that that's maybe a bit of a stretch, but let's just say hypothetically that is the case. Well, there's still reasons to have this stuff, not the least of which is the $29 trillion in debt that we've managed to accrue in the name of the U.S. taxpayer. And that is bad, but something you don't hear mentioned a lot in financial circles. You hear that the national debt quoted quite a bit, especially these days with, debt ceiling looming and all of that. We've heard quite a bit about that. But what you don't hear about is the unfunded liabilities that are not included in the national debt, because aside from the $29 trillion that we owe, and $29 trillion is pretty significant. If you break that down per person, it's quite a bit of money, but there's really no reason to break that debt down per person because a lot of households and a lot of people in this country don't pay any income tax. So if you break down the $29 trillion in debt per taxpayer, it's actually over $220,000 per taxpayer. So to call this debt unpayable, I think, is not a stretch. I don't know that if you take each individual taxpayer out there in the U.S., I don't think that they've got $220,000 to fork over to the government to pay for this debt. And I don't think there's any real rational tax plan that would be able to raise that much money and pay that debt off. And clearly, we're just in a system where the debt is going to continue piling up until something gives. What that something will be, I don't know. Perhaps other countries will stop loaning us money. Perhaps the status of the dollar as the world's reserve currency will fail. But one thing's for sure, it's not sustainable in the long run. On top of that national debt, we actually have even more in unfunded liabilities. The number is just over $157 trillion. And what those unfunded liabilities are, basically, it's everything that the government has promised to pay for going forward. So it's Medicare, Social Security, federal employee benefits, veterans benefits, everything that the government needs to pay in the future, and we don't have the money to do it. So $157 trillion, I'm not going to even bother breaking that down per taxpayer. We can just break that down per U.S. citizen, and it's actually north of $400,000 per citizen. That's men, women, and children. So anybody out there who thinks that we're going to be able to raise that kind of money via taxation, I think has got another thing coming. So really, there's only two options. One, we could not make the payments that we've promised to make, or rather the U.S. government could default and not make those payments, that $157 trillion that it's going to need going forward. Or there is one other option, of course, and let's see what former Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan had to say about that back in 2005.
Do you still believe that we should maintain the fundamental principles of Social Security as it did in '83?
I think we should maintain the principles of Social Security, but I think the existing structure is not working, and that until we can construct a system which creates the savings that are required to build the real assets so that the retirees have real goods and services, we don't have a system that's working. We have one that basically moves cash around, and we can guarantee cash benefits as far out and at whatever size you like, but we cannot guarantee their purchasing power.
So, as you can see, this guy gets it. Alan Greenspan certainly is no dummy. He understands that the unfunded liabilities of the U.S. government are basically unpayable and that the system that we have is unsustainable. Now, that was back in 2005, of course, that he said that. Nothing has really changed except that the numbers and the liabilities have gotten a lot bigger. I don't think there's any mystery as to how we are going to pay for this. It's going to be, well, it's going to be printing press goes brrr, but of course, there's not any actual currency being printed. These will just be ones and zeros created with a keystroke in a computer somewhere, and it'll go right into that electronic banking system that we have. Don't be under any illusions that there are plans to pay off this debt or that it's even a possibility. The writing is on the wall as far as how this stuff will be paid for, and it's going to be massive money creation and the devaluing of the dollar. It's really inevitable. The only other option is that the U.S. government defaults on its obligations, and, that would be devastating, I guess. That would be a huge problem. We'd have to stop living above our means, and we'd have to balance the budget and all of that, and obviously there's no political will for that in the U.S. At this time. But the other option is just as bad, and that is to basically sacrifice the dollar to rampant inflation so that these debts and obligations can be paid in devalued currency, because that's the only other way it's going to happen. Unless you think every citizen out there can fork over $400,000 plus in taxes, there's only a couple of options, and the one that we're going to see, I'm pretty sure, is going to be hyperinflation. Now, I can't tell you when that's going to happen or exactly in what shape or form that'll be. Maybe the can get kicked down the road for another couple years, maybe another decade. I don't know. One thing is for sure, I rest a lot easier knowing that I have at least a portion of my wealth stored in physical precious metals in my possession. There's no counterparty risk. A brokerage can't come out and confiscate this stuff. My bank can't bail this stuff in. They can't confiscate it from me. This is really something that, even if you're not a silver stacker per se, let's just say you're an average Joe and you have some investments, well, this isn't investment advice, but you might want to get your hands on some physical precious metals, just in case, just as an insurance policy. Maybe you think all of this stuff about the debt and hyperinflation is kind of far-fetched and it'll be avoided somehow. And hey, maybe it will. I don't want to be too pessimistic, and I'm not a genius, obviously. So I'm not trying to tell you that this stuff is absolutely guaranteed. I mean, I don't see a way out. I don't see how these debts are going to get paid without hyperinflating the currency and devaluing the dollar, but maybe Congress will pull a rabbit out of its hat. I don't know. Just in case, physical precious metals are an insurance policy for your wealth. They are one of the few assets you can get your hands on that lack any form of counterparty risk. So very safe compared to electronic assets, in my opinion. And everybody should have at least some precious metals on hand, some portion of their wealth, because there might come a day when you wake up and you can't access the funds in your bank account, your brokerage account is inaccessible, your credit cards may not work. So having some of this stuff on hand is, like I said, just an insurance policy. And all of us buy insurance for lots of things. We have homeowners insurance, maybe our house never burns down, maybe it never floods, maybe a hurricane never hits, but you still carry the insurance, and it's wise to do so. Well, the same thing goes for your wealth, and that is what physical bullion is. It is an insurance policy to make sure that you don't lose everything in the event of some kind of a financial disaster. And also, some of this stuff is really nice to stack up too, like this 2-ounce Kraken coin. It's beautiful Canadian coin. I love these things. And, U.S. Silver Eagle. Can't go wrong with getting a few of those in your stack. But it doesn't really matter what kind of physical metal you have, in my opinion. You might want to start off with, say, some silver dimes. These things are awesome, and they're former U.S. currency. They're 90% silver. They're very divisible, so if you need to pay someone in silver, you can do it pretty readily. But if you're curious about what type of bullion to stack, maybe you can check out some of my other videos. All I'm saying is that you might want to consider keeping a portion of your wealth in your possession. I think that that would be wise for everybody, stackers and non-stackers alike, to consider. Anyway, if you guys like this video, please give it a quick thumbs up. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will catch you next time. Smart Silver Stacker, out.